Everyone. Welcome and thanks for coming tonight. We're gonna wait maybe just about one more minute. We do expect a lot of folks tonight, so we want to give just one more minute and then we'll dive right into tonight's presentation. So thanks for your patience and thanks for being here. Okay, 7:01. So I think it's time to dive right in. Thank you again so much for taking the time to be here tonight. I just want to acknowledge and appreciate we've got some administrators joining us, many of them on the call tonight, so appreciate their presence here. It's been a lot of late nights and a lot of planning time, so I appreciate their continued support. Also, some members of the Board of Education are with us tonight too, and some members of our task force, our advisory task force. So I just want to extend thanks to all of them for the hard work and the commitment to tonight's topic, and that is bringing more of our students back to in-person learning within the Pelham Public Schools. Um, I think just for sake of getting some common base information, what I'm going to do tonight is just do a quick review of the presentation that was shared with the Board of Education last night. And then we will open it up for questions. Since the group is going to be large, I'm going to ask that folks put their questions in the chat. And if needed, Alex Wolf, our Public Information Officer, will assist me in the chat. So I'm going to try to move quickly so we've got opportunity for those questions towards the end. We had a great session this morning. I even see some folks that came back for round two, even though it's the same information. It's a lot to digest, so we welcome you back to this second session. Just want to put out there tonight, just to think about as you're listening to the presentation, thinking about questions. Some questions may be better addressed at the building level. If you have a unique circumstance, particular situation, that's probably much better discussed with your building principal. So just keep that in mind. This really is kind of the big picture overview, general policy, and approach for the district. Just, certainly keep that in mind. Principals are very accessible all the time. So please don't feel afraid to reach out to them. They're very happy to work with you to help understand what's ahead and certainly help you to make some important decisions. The other thing I would also put out there, we may not have all the answers tonight. As I mentioned, we have an advisory task force that has been meeting. We've met 3 times. We still have a couple more meetings to go. So the work is not 100% complete, but recognizing the timeliness of this issue and the need to plan and for the community to know where we're heading, we thought it was important to come out now and share the big picture information about what is ahead in the schools. So more information will come from your building principals, in particular, more communication from the district as the days go by. But for now, we're going to do our best to answer everything that we can, and that which we can't answer tonight, we'll definitely be sure to follow up with some other communication. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and kick off tonight's presentation. Okay, put this up. Okay, so tonight we're coming to you to share the work that's been going on. This is really a labor of love, I think, at this point. Um, as we said to the board last night, it was a year ago that we were announcing our initial shutdown of our schools, not knowing what was ahead. And now here we are a year later, very happy to be coming to you to talk about how we're looking to reopen our schools. Oops, just remind folks to mute, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. So yeah, a year later, we didn't know at that moment in time that that once we left that March, I think 12th, that would be the last day that we would be all in with all of our students and staff in the schools for a year. It's been a tough year for everyone, but it's time. It's time for us to now be turning this corner to the last chapter of this school year, the home stretch, to get us to the end of the year in a way that's going to allow for our students to come back. So from the beginning of our planning, these have really been our priorities: the holistic wellness of our students, holistic wellness of our staff. We can't teach our students if our staff are not cared for and considered in our decision making. So those have been huge priorities from the beginning. Certainly, how do we deliver a quality core instructional program in an equitable manner, and align with the requirements that are before us. So again, I want to just significant thanks to the administrators and a group of teachers that joined us really starting a year ago. Our curriculum, I'm sorry, staff developers, along with our administrators, literally a year ago, were scrambling to put together initial materials, anticipating a shutdown. And then the administrative team worked nonstop through the spring into the summer to deliver our initial plan, to plan for how we reopened in September. And thankfully, we've been able, for the most part, little building closures here or there, but to be open in a hybrid model since September, thanks to the incredible work that was done throughout the summer. So incredibly appreciative. But these from the get-go were our goals as we moved into this work. The administrators have continued to meet throughout the year to tweak plans, make adjustments, in particular at the elementary level, and have been meeting for the last couple of months to look at this question of how do we bring more students back, looking at our spacing and logistics. So we've been planning and tweaking all along. Moving into January, February, we broadened that discussion to include a community reopening advisory task force to bring in the voices of our parents from our community, but folks who also have expertise in the medical professions, other educators, mental health professionals, folks who have specialties in logistics and operations, excuse me, to give me just to help give us a different lens on the work as we plan towards these final reopening steps. These are the key questions that we tried to tackle throughout planning, and that our task force is still really working to help finalize decisions around. But more importantly, at this moment, I think are these key learnings that have occurred over the last really the last couple of months. So if we go back to June, when the guidance was issued that we needed to work by, that information came from the Department of Health, New York State Department of Health, as well as New York State Education Department. And where those guidance documents differed, the Department of Health rules would prevail. So that's what we started planning with back in June. And at the time, as a region, we're consulting with other districts in the region. We all took a very conservative approach because we didn't know what was ahead. So we did take a conservative approach with a very strict reading of the 6-foot distancing. So that was the stance at the time. And we have now been in school, as we said, since September. We've learned a lot. We've been successful in many ways. We've had some, issues to work through as far as quarantine and logistics, but we've worked through those. And now that we've seen that, lived through that, we know what works a lot better than we did back in June. Additionally, since June, there's been a lot of research coming out, international, national level, empirical research looking at what is working in schools and communities as far as spread, and what are appropriate mitigating strategies to help with reducing the spread of the disease. This has given us an opportunity to see from research that while we will never eliminate all risk, that will never happen. It doesn't happen now. We'll never eliminate all risk, but moving to 3 feet, while it does increase risk some, does seem to be a manageable level of risk, especially when compared with the mental, social, and emotional wellness of students who have been out of school now, normal school, for a year. So we've seen that research really evolving from all over the world. We also have seen now some of our other parts of the state chose to take a different approach from the beginning. And there are schools in particular that we have spoken with on Long Island and other parts of the state, but Long Island is the ones that we're most familiar with, where districts have been using 3 feet with barriers successfully since the fall in some cases. So we've got lessons learned from them, lessons learned from research that give us the ability to look back to that guidance and be able to take just a different lens to it, a different approach, more of a lessons learned approach, and to then be able to consider the idea of moving our students closer together down towards that 3 foot mark. One more piece, I would say the guidance does call for 6 feet or masks and barriers. And that really is what's in the guidance. So as you see this plan that we'll lay out tonight, that is really what we'll be moving towards. As we go below 6 feet, our reliance on masks and barriers becomes all the more significant. And barriers, as our task force medical professionals have reminded us, in addition to being in the guidance, they're a great visible reminder to help stay distant and separate from other people. And they give a feeling of safety in addition to just the mask. So it's an important contribution to the plan. So this is the plan that we will be rolling out at this point in time. It was proposed to the board last night, and they have green lighted us to move ahead in this direction. Our elementary schools, we plan to begin full-time in-person instruction for all grades K through 5 on April 12th. We debated whether to phase in grade by grade, to go in grade bands, or just to go all at once. In our discussions with the principals, from a logistical perspective, it just made the most sense to go all in at once. So April 12th is the date. We picked April 12th for a number of reasons. As you may be aware, each vacation period that we've had throughout this school year, we have experienced a surge in cases or a bump in cases the week following the vacation period. So especially when there were holidays, we saw even more because of living room spread. So looking ahead to spring break, we know that there's going to be traveling. We know there's going to be holidays. So we do anticipate and expect that there will be another bump. So rather than try to accomplish this implementation in the midst of dealing with that, we thought the wiser move was to wait the week, get that out of the system, let those folks who traveled, who need to quarantine, and give us a clean slate the following week. Additionally, by waiting to the 12th, it allows more of our staff to become fully vaccinated. Our staff have been incredibly responsive and receptive to vaccinations, and our elected officials have been really great about helping to get us access to that for our staff. So we at this point know that by the time we come back from spring break, 50% of our entire staff, not just our teachers, but our entire staff will be fully vaccinated, with those numbers growing. We anticipate the maximum amount of vaccines based between those who can't get it or those who choose not to. We will likely get up to a 75% vaccination rate among the entire staff in the district, which is really great from what medical professionals have told us. Also, by waiting to April 12th, we get into much warmer weather. As many of you know, we've kept the windows open in many cases through the winter. So thank you for bundling your children up. Hats, coats, mittens, anything that was needed. But we need that for fresh air. That's one of the easiest and best recommendations for improving air quality in classrooms. So we will have warmer weather so that windows can continue to stay open and open wider. April also gives us opportunity to use outdoor space more regularly. It also is going to allow us time to get our furniture reset up and get any needed equipment that was on order. Schools have been throughout COVID really, experiencing supply chain delays. So this will give us a little bit more time to get the equipment, which you'll see that as we talk through the presentation. So all signs really pointed to April 12th as the most logical date to make this initial step in implementation, but all the more reason why we want to make it all in on April 12th for our elementary students. At the secondary level, we do plan to begin phasing in during April, dependent on further assessment of capacity, which we'll talk about in the future upcoming slide. So we wanted to make sure to be as clear and transparent as possible about what this is going to look like, because we are asking parents to make a choice and a commitment. We're going to need that at all levels to know who is returning so that we can plan appropriately. And we are going to need families to make a choice that they're planning to stick with for these remaining months of school. So this is a typical elementary classroom. We have begun moving furniture back into classrooms already so we can get them laid out and see what 3 feet really looks like and determine where we can accommodate that and where we may need to make some adjustments. So this is what a typical classroom would look like if desks are all in rows. I should add, I forgot to mention it this morning, we will have some tables in classrooms with dividers. We may have some of the innovative furniture turned in different configurations. So there may be a little flexibility on the directional positioning of the desks. But in essence, this is likely the distance you'll be seeing between students in a typical elementary classroom. We are working to get new barriers that don't have that big wide edge on them. because that does make visibility a little bit more challenging, especially once you have all students back in the classroom. But that is pretty much your typical classroom. Windows will be open. Our HVAC systems are fully functioning. And in most of our buildings, that means at least 6 to 8 uh, exchanges of air in the classroom with every hour. And then in our fully conditioned building, the middle school, it is an even higher turnover rate than that. And the middle school, because of that equipment, has everything ranging from a MERV 8 to a MERV 13 filter on our HVA systems. In addition to these HVA system pieces that have already been in place throughout the school year, given that we're increasing the density in the classroom, we are going to be adding box fans to each classroom as an exhaust fan to just help that air continue to circulate, and air purifiers to all instructional spaces. So I mentioned most of these mitigation strategies. This is what will be in place in all classrooms. The one piece that I do want to touch on additionally, and this is really reflected in a lot of the guidance as well, we are attempting to put together, actually we have been putting together, we've been piloting and getting in place a surveillance testing program that we feel will be very important as we work towards returning our students to school. So thanks to Julia Chung and our school nurses who have been actively working, they set the system up and have been testing students now for a number of weeks. The goal of that really is to establish a baseline prevalence within the schools. I think conceptually we all know and recognize and agree that that spread of COVID within schools is generally less than it is in the community. But we also know that the community can have impacts on the school. As we look to increase the number of students in the schools, we want to make sure that we have a baseline, we know what that prevalence is, and then as we increase students, we don't see a spike in cases. We need to be able to identify that very quickly if it's there to determine, do we need to pull back? Do we need additional mitigation strategies? What's the cause? Is it in-school spread? Or again, is it something coming from the outside? So with our surveillance testing program, our goal is to test 20% of students and staff district-wide monthly. And it's important, our medical professionals on our task force have reminded us it's important that that is broad testing, random testing, and that we do that consistently. So this is really where we're going to need everyone's help. And I believe Ms. Chung has already sent surveys out to the elementary, and I think we've already got a lot of our slots filled up for the rest of this month and even into next month, which is wonderful. All students who are coming to in-person instruction are expected to participate. It's a very non-invasive program. There's a lovely video floating around the internet with me being tested as the first one. It really is non-invasive. It's not the PCR test that that you do at medical centers where it's all the way back to the back of your sinuses. It's much less invasive. It's really, it feels like a Q-tip around your nostrils 5 times on each side. It's really that simple. And I should add, those are not PCR tests. These are Binex Now rapid tests. They're approved for surveillance testing purposes, but not for return to school purposes. But they are, again, they're non-invasive, simple, and they're provided to us free from the New York State Department of Health. Again, we're looking to establish that positivity baseline. We're hoping to develop as well a dashboard to have on our website just to keep folks up to date on the region, data on the region, data on the schools, both testing positivity rates and any other relevant data that the task force identifies for us. And again, this is where we need everyone's partnership. Some questions that came up this morning, I'll just touch them now. We are, again, hoping that all students will participate. There is a parental consent form that is required, so your schools will be making that available. I believe that's been in the emails from Ms. Chung. That needs to be provided to the nurse. Parents do not need to be present for that, but if a parent does want to be present, you just need to work with your school, your nurse, or your principal to coordinate that. For the elementary, once we open on April 12th, this is what we're anticipating the schedule to be, beginning at 8:30. So we're pushing that back from the current 9 o'clock to 8:30 for the start of our staggered arrival. We do still need those first 15 minutes or so for setup for the teachers, but starting at 8:30, we'll stagger our arrival in. And then the day will be extended longer than it currently is. So lunch will be about the same time as normal. We're pushing dismissal back just a little bit to 2:40. It's about 10 minutes back. So a net gain of, I think it was a net gain of 20 minutes to the day. Again, staggered dismissal, similar to what is going on now. Um, and we did that at the end of the day so that we could move the open office hours from the start of the day to the end of the day. So I know you know we've been through numerous iterations. We had open office hours in the morning and afternoon first. Then we eliminated the afternoon so that we could extend the instructional day, and that was the less used window. Now that we only have the morning, what we're seeing is off in the morning. It's very nice and it's great personal connections for students. They might, talk about their loose tooth or their dog, which is great, but it's not allowing us the opportunity for as much academic support of students. So what we're doing is moving that now to back to the end of the day, really specifically with the needs of our fully virtual learners in mind, because we know that we're going to need to provide just more targeted to support to them as we make this shift. So that's basically the framework for the day. Specific schedules and logistics for arrival and dismissal will be coming from your building principals. We are still planning to do our early release on Wednesdays because as long as our teachers have those cameras in the classroom and have fully virtual students that they're supporting, we're going to need to allow them that planning and professional development and meeting time to continue to be prepared. A couple just an additional point of information about lunch. As you likely know, at the elementary level, students have been eating lunch in the classroom. We are continuing with that. So in the classrooms, it's important to be aware that the desks are now, as I said before, going to be 3 feet distanced, and students will still continue to be in the classroom at their desks eating lunch. So that is where the barriers will be incredibly important because students have to take their masks off to eat. So again, schools that we've spoken to have been doing 3 feet, have been doing lunch in the classroom at the desks at 3 feet with barriers successfully. So that's why we feel confident that we can move in this direction. Certainly teachers will have the ability, whoever's monitoring the classroom, if they want to do a half and half, where half the students, every other student takes their mask off and eats while the others do maybe independent reading or quiet activity and then switch. There's a lot of creative ideas you could use to create more space. If there's reading nooks, chairs, different places they could go to without around the classroom, certainly will maximize the space as much as possible. And some schools may be able to utilize larger spaces, like the gymnasium is open or the auditorium or outdoors. Those are all available to teachers and to classes, so principals will work to help manage that space. With the return to school, we are asking for your help as well in making some tweaks to our attendance. And we say that because I think we all recognize this is a year for flexibility. We've had to be flexible, you've had to be flexible, we have to be flexible with one another. So because we had the full virtual and the hybrid and the in-person hybrid model, um, we were able to accommodate certainly when there was quarantines or students had a runny nose and couldn't pass the daily screener, so they had to stay home. We're able to allow them to Zoom to join the class virtually. But what it also did was that flexibility unfortunately created a bit of a revolving door for things that weren't necessarily that things that we would typically be excusing students from school for. So this is where we're asking everyone's commitment once we get on the other side of spring break, and we get ready to come back to school, to really buckle down and come back to a little bit more normalcy about a commitment to be in the classroom every day. So we are expecting students to be there every day if they choose full-time in person. Certainly if they are sick, if they're too sick to engage in their education, they should stay home. They should not go on the Google Meet. They should be in bed. They should be getting better, recuperating. And of course, as usual, we'll continue with the expectation of the COVID negative results to return. So we want to start making some of those normal breaks back to more of a normal routine. We will, of course, still honor the ability for students to join the Google Meet if they're under a mandated quarantine or if they're awaiting test results because they couldn't pass that daily screener. Again, we know we have to exercise some flexibility. What we can't continue to do is to honor things like pre-quarantining for a vacation or being on vacation, traveling, staying home because it's rainy. Secondary level, we have students, all of a sudden it'll be a day for a test and 20 out of 23 students are home. Those things, we have to break those habits and break ourselves back into a more normal, committed routine. And one of the other reasons for that, and I'm sure I'll touch on it later, is because the arrangements that we're making to make this feasible are dependent on people's commitment to who's returning. So we will still be offering our fully remote learning option. Many families have been on that successfully throughout this year. They're welcome to continue on that. Those families who don't feel comfortable returning or who need the flexibility that we can't offer in the full-time in-person, um, absolutely have the fully remote learning option available to them, and it will continue to be the model that we currently have that everyone's familiar with. So teachers will continue to be required to keep their learning materials on Google Classroom, and students can access the class through the Google Meet. I already talked about the office hour shift. And that really is one piece that we thought was important for support. Additionally, we have our task force looking at how do we support teachers in supporting students, both in the classroom and fully virtually, because we want those students who are virtual to remain connected to their peers and to their teacher. I think, common sense tells us when you have more students in the classroom, certainly the attention is going to have to turn a bit more to the class because of classroom management and making sure things are safe and progressing. But we do want to make sure to still attend to our fully virtual students. So we're working on that again with our task force in the hopes of adding some strategies to make sure that those students continue to get a quality education and stay connected. I will put it out there as well. We don't know what next year holds yet. But one thing that we have learned this year is if we do need to offer remote learning at the elementary level next year, we recognize that we need to set up some dedicated fully virtual teachers from the get-go. So there may be more information coming out about that before the end of the year because we would need to plan that into our staffing and class lists over the summer. We were not able to make the shift to that this year. We didn't start with that in place this year. We surveyed, some of you may remember, we surveyed back in November to ask if people would be willing to shift to a full virtual teacher. We did not get enough students at that time to make it a viable model. I think district-wide, we had over 200 students. We only had about 20 at the K through 5 that were willing to switch, which would have turned into a virtual one-room schoolhouse, which really was not a tenable instructional situation. So we were not able to do it then. We anticipate we will likely have the same scenario now where students will not want to move away from the class and the teachers that they have established an 8-month relationship with. So at this point, we're not planning to set up dedicated fully virtual teachers for this spring. If the numbers turn out differently, we certainly will revisit that. But just so you have some background on why that did not occur this year, I wanted to share that. So that is really what the elementary program will look like. And we wanted you to understand it because we are asking all families now to make a commitment for the remainder of the year. It's critical, as I said, for planning of space. What we need to do is know exactly who's planning to come back and who is not, so that we can assess our classroom space and finalize classrooms. If we've got to make sure that we've got the large class in the large classroom and the small class in the small classroom, we may have to do some classroom swaps or moves to accommodate the size at 3 feet. We may have to look at spaces like libraries or other spaces to make sure that we have enough space. So understand that with these decisions comes a lot of work. It's our custodians, our principals, teachers having to move classrooms potentially to make space, which is why we will do this because we want our students back, but we also need students to commit to being here because of the implications of all that work that has gone into putting things in place for that to happen. Also, and I didn't mention it earlier, but that revolving door of not knowing who was dependably coming each day was a real toll on the teachers. They planned each day for who they expected to have in class. They had to plan differently for fully virtual students. And then if 3 students who were supposed to be in that day didn't come, now they're fully virtual, the teachers have to scramble on the spot. And it really affects the instructional process and planning process. So again, we need some more dependability for them as we increase the density of the number of students in the class. So we will be sending out a commitment survey tomorrow. So watch your email for that. We are asking that responses are due back by noon on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. We do recognize that that's parent-teacher conferences that day. So if there need to be if you have some conversations that change your thoughts on that afterwards, we can work for that. Just speak with your principal. But we really are asking so that we've got as much planning time as possible that we have those responses by the 17th. So now we move to the secondary level. You're going to hear a lot of similar themes. So hopefully we can move quickly through this, but there are some unique challenges at the secondary level. So this is a photo of what secondary classrooms are likely to look like. Obviously, these are teachers. And yes, one of them is on her phone, but she's a teacher and it was not a class, so she's allowed to be on her phone. That was just a joke. We wanted to show the difference, and I think it's pretty logical. When you look at 3 feet distancing, we're measuring 3 feet from the center of one head to the center of the next head. So when you do that from my head to another adult's head, or a high schooler to another high schooler, that's very different than 3 feet from the middle of a third grader's head to the next third grader's head. So it's really important to understand the spacing that we are talking about. This really looks pretty much like a normal classroom with students seated very close together. We, at the secondary level, again, HVA systems are fully functioning. We'll be adding the box fans and the air purifiers to all classrooms. It is important to note, as I said, the middle school is a fully conditioned building. So it does have different air systems, but again, it's got the higher level MERV filters. There are some classrooms in the middle school that, as a result of being the conditioned building, the windows don't open. So again, just a point of information to be fully transparent as you're going to be asked to make really important decisions. So similar with the elementary, we're using all those same mitigation strategies, 3 feet, masks, barriers, et cetera. We feel the surveillance testing program is going to be even more critical at the secondary level. I think we all know from the research that older students transmit more. Elementary, not as much, but at the secondary level, and even from the school closures that we've had far more cases at the secondary level, high school more than middle school. The older they are, the more adult-like they are, the more socializing there is, the more spread of the disease. So it's really, really important that we're able to keep an eye on the prevalence within the schools. Same thing as we said before, as far as attendance, students are expected to attend when they're scheduled to be in person. And this becomes all the more important at the high school because, and as I'll talk about in an upcoming slide, we don't yet know, because of the small size of our classrooms and the larger enrollment in our classes, if we're going to be able to bring 100% of everyone who wants to come back. So at the secondary level, literally, if one student says they're coming back and then they're in and out, they may be taking a seat away from another student who would faithfully be there every day. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And of course, at the secondary level, we are also continuing the fully remote model that has been in place since the start of school. So to talk more specifically about the challenges at the middle school and high school, we have small classrooms, especially in the high school where the building's 100 years old, but even in the middle school. So at the middle school, about 50%, and at the high school, about 65% of our classrooms cannot achieve 3 feet distancing between students at full capacity. If we had all of our students back, we could not get 3 feet. Additionally, our room utilization is maxed out. So room utilization really has to do with how often all the rooms within the building are used. So we've got 9 periods in the day, 10 if you count 0 period, but for sake of argument, 9 periods in the day. Say we have 50 classrooms. In a typical school, your ideal utilization is around 75%. So most rooms are used, but you've got some space. So that means flexibility. If you need to move a class from one room to another room or split a class up, you've got some flexibility. For us, we're at about 98% room utilization, which means all of our classrooms are used basically 8 or 9 periods out of 9 a day, which means we have very little flexibility. So if you have a large class in a small room, we don't have a large room necessarily available for us to move them to. Also, if we had a room that maybe, let's say, accommodated 22 students, but there's 25 enrolled in that class, so 3 can't fit, we thought about, could we have satellite or overflow rooms? We don't have the rooms to have the overflow in because, again, of this room utilization. Often the schools have been able to do that where they split classes between 2 rooms, or they can assign them to an extra room, and they can Google Meet into their class and rotate who's in the satellite room. We don't have that capacity. Also in the middle school, high school complex, it is a shared cafeteria space. So although we have cafeteria A, B, and C, that does not seat all of our students. It seats about a little bit more than a grade level at any given point in time. So usually the middle school students are all in there, a little bit of space for high school, but that's about it. Most schools, again, they would have a separate cafeteria for high school and middle school. We have basically the one shared space, and it's not large. Thankfully, we have for many years have had open campus at the high school. This year we extended it all the way to ninth grade because of our space constraints. So that does ease some of the pressure. But we've had this year, because of 6-foot distancing and because of the number of students in the cafeteria, we have had to set up some spaces for lunch in the blue gym. That's a lunch location in addition to our cafeteria space to be able to accommodate all students. On rainy days, we have to bring all the students inside. We don't have recess for middle school. We can't split the grade levels up. And even many of our high school students stay on campus on rainy days. So then we need additional space for lunch, which then overtakes our remaining gymnasiums. So now students who had gym have to be displaced. So every move, every domino has an effect on another one. So space really is our issue. And these are issues that really are unique to Pelham just because of our facilities. So I say all this to say that before we can finalize our plans at the high school level, we need more data. And we need more data on exactly which students will be coming in every day and which are we going to stay fully remote. We've had this revolving door, as I mentioned earlier. A significant number of our high school students have been staying home or in person. We need to end that cycle because literally every seat will count and every seat will matter as far as getting students fully back in school. So again, as we said, we're going to be sending a commitment survey out tomorrow. We need that back by St. Patrick's Day. Once we have that data for the secondary level, that's when we're going to be able to determine, can we bring back 100% of the students who want to return or not? And if we can't, then how many can we bring at? Right now, we're at a 50% hybrid model with 6-foot distancing. We'd love to get to where we can bring 100% of students who want to be back. But if we can't do that, we're already starting to look at something in between that gives us more than the 50% model, something like a 66% model, where instead of 2 full days a week, maybe students are 4 days a week on some kind of rotating basis, or maybe a model that will give us 75% in, 80% in. We haven't gotten all the way through analysis. My gut is that we could probably house about 75 to 80% of our full student body. But we don't know that until we get the commitments, until we're actually able to lay out the classrooms and literally go classroom by classroom, student schedule by student schedule to determine what percentage we'll be able to bring back. So that's why that data is important. And that is also why if a student says they're coming back to the middle school or high school, they need to come back because they may be taking a seat from someone else. So once we have that figured out, whether it's 100% of those who want to return, or if we're at a reduced, at a modified hybrid model, this is the order that we plan to bring our students in. So I will say those who are on the current hybrid will remain on the current hybrid while we start to phase in the full-time grades. So we would start likely with 8th and 12th. Our 8th graders, it's the first time, the first Regents exams. So unfortunately at this point, we're still waiting for some additional information, but it looks like the US Department of Education is still requiring federal accountability of standardized assessments, which means a number of our Regents exams will have to remain in place. We're still waiting to hear, as well as the 3 through 8 state assessments. Right now, unfortunately, they are scheduled to be in mid-April and early May, right when we are hoping to phase our students back in, which is quite troublesome. Because we want our implementation to be successful, and we don't want the first things our students to do when they walk in the door for the first time all together in a year is to have to sit down in front of a standardized test. So that is part of why we don't have a timeline out for you tonight for the secondary. The need for additional data is also part of why we don't have a timeline. And also our task force is looking to establish some metrics that will help us on a phase in. So that being said, we do plan to start the phase in April, and we'll be coming out to you with a timeline once we hear from the Board of Regents meeting next week on the assessment question, once we get the data back from the survey on St. Patrick's Day and have time to assess that. So before the spring break, we're hoping to have at least some information for you regarding a timeline. If not before, then immediately upon return. So again, back to the order of phase in. Our 8th graders will be facing Regents exams for the first time. Our seniors lost the end of their junior year and have not been together as a class at all in their senior year. So we wanted to bring them back as this is their last chance to be together as a class in the building. Next, we would move to grades 6 through 9. So grade 6 has been in the building, but they have not been all together in the building as middle schoolers as a full class. And same for ninth grade. They've been in their hybrid, but they've never been all together in high school. So again, bringing them back as the youngest in the grades. And then we would follow with the remaining grades according to our phase-in schedule if all goes as planned. Bell schedule would look a lot like a normal bell schedule. School starting at 8:15, ending ninth period around 2:46. And then we would have time for our academy period as usual at the end of the day. The slight adjustment to the schedule comes from the fact that we are allowing 5-minute passing time between classes instead of 3. We've been doing that during the hybrid model to reduce density in the hallway so we can stagger. I think it's the odd number classes move first, then the even, or vice versa. We're going to need to continue that because at the high school and middle school during passing time, students are going to be closer than 3 feet. They're going to be walking down the hall together, even with reduced density, but we wanted to at least have the staggering ability to keep that as low as possible. With Academy, we still have to do work to determine if we're going to maybe alternate between in-person academies some days, virtual academies other days, because again, we need to make sure to attend to the needs of both the virtual learners and the in-person. And again, we're looking to maintain the early release on Wednesdays to continue to support our teachers and their planning needs. Additionally, we've repurposed those afternoons for a lot of our Committee on Special Education meetings. We're doing more significant surveillance testing on those afternoons. So they've come to be quite useful within the school system. So again, secondary parents, we're looking for you to make the same kind of commitment. I'm not going to, I've touched on most of these points, so I'm not going to reiterate them. I think I gave a pretty clear message on those before. And as with everything from the beginning of this pandemic, it does take a community to make this successful. Everyone's behavior outside of school has direct implications for inside of school. So please, we urge you to continue to adhere to all the safety protocols that we've all been doing for the last year, even though we're all weary and tired and looking forward to them not being here. We need to continue with those longer. We ask you to review the family health agreement that all families signed at the beginning of the school year. We really need, again, as we're increasing density and going to lower distancing, we have to commit to doing the things to keep each other safe. Our goal is to get our students back and to end the year strong and in a way that we can be proud of. And that really is going to be dependent on the efforts of all of us to make that happen. So with that, I am going to stop presenting. And again, questions, if you would, please put them in the chat. And I'm going to go to the chat and then start working our way through. Okay. So first question was, what is the definition of success for those Long Island schools using the closer distancing? Was it no quarantines at all for a certain time period? No, to be quite honest, the folks I spoke to, it was elementary level in particular, and they did still have quarantines, but they did not have to do full school shutdowns. So I think the fact, as I said earlier, is there will still be risk by bringing more students together. Obviously, we're increasing density. We are increasing the risk some, and we are increasing the potential for quarantines because the quarantine rules still are the same. Students that are within a 6-foot radius of a positive case, whether it's a student or a teacher, are still going to quarantine. So obviously now there will be more students moving within that radius. The good thing, and I will share this, we just shared it with our staff today. New York State, thankfully, has finally adopted the CDC guidelines around vaccination, meaning that that people who are fully vaccinated do not have to quarantine when they're exposed to a positive case for the 3 months after they're fully vaccinated. So as I think probably everyone knows, our school shutdowns, basically, whether they were classroom shutdowns or school shutdowns, were caused by staffing shortages from quarantines. So that's the good news. We do have a lot of staff vaccinated, so we anticipate that toll on staffing will not be as great as it was before. I don't think any of us in any school can really say that no quarantines are a reality yet. Hopefully that will come, hopefully by the fall. But at this point, they were able to keep their schools from having to fully close. Can you share the research you keep mentioning that shows 3 feet? So we do have a website that's, I think, and Alex, I may ask you to help me exactly which website this is. The task force has been reviewing research, and the research articles, I think we put some of those on the website.
I don't believe that it is on the website right now, but we can certainly add it tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you very much. There were a couple key research articles that really laid out a clear picture of what the risk looks like and the difference between 3 and 6 feet, especially for people with no underlying health conditions. So yeah, we'll get those posted up onto the website for you. Can you please address variants and other increased transmissibility in children? Well, I'm not a medical expert, but I know that is a reality, and that is part of the equation in making decisions. Everything that we keep hearing, even from our medical professionals on the committee, are that mitigation strategies, the same ones, will continue to work, in particular masking, barriers, and distancing as much as possible. So those will continue to be the case. And I know we're still waiting for more information about the vaccines and their impact on variants. But this is something we're gonna have to keep an eye on. And again, this is part of why we want to have a surveillance testing program in place so that we can see any problematic changes in prevalence. This was shared the plan with an immunologist who said the greatest concern is lunch hour. Yep, that is absolutely, I agree with that. Will middle and high school students still be allowed to eat outdoors? Yes, we are working on, we do have a bid out for tents. Again, we tried in the fall. We're not able to procure them because between supply and demand, the prices were exorbitant. We do have that bid back out in the hopes of getting, especially at the middle school, high school campus. Can't promise because the bids are not in yet, but we are at least exploring that. One thing that's probably really important to mention, at the middle school and high school, we are working to keep the desks still at 6 feet in the cafeterias. Again, because the students are older, the greater transmission, we wanted to try to keep greater distancing for our older students. So that's probably important for folks to know at the secondary school. Why is testing only at 20% district-wide? Shouldn't it be 20% per building? This comes down to capacity. As I said, right now, we've got Julia and our school nurses managing this on top of their normal jobs. So we wanted to set a goal that we thought was manageable from a human resources perspective. Again, in working with our committee, the biggest goal they said was to be random, broad, and consistent. So this equates to about 5% district-wide per week. We would love to go beyond that, but right now we just don't have the capacity. So we certainly are exploring if there are testing companies, partnerships, other resources we could bring in to help increase that capacity. And if anyone does have resources such as that, if you could just reach out to me, shoot me an email one-on-one, I'd love to talk further because we are looking for partners in that. But right now it's based on capacity. Why is PCR testing and thus required for return not being used for screening, which is equally important? So we're not required to have a surveillance testing program. That's something that we felt was important to put in place. The state does provide the rapid Binex tests for us, so we wanted to make use of that resource, trying to be cognizant of certainly of resources for the district, but also wanting something that was quick, easy, and non-invasive. So will the dollars from the new COVID relief bill be earmarked for schools for better, more accurate testing? That's to be determined. We don't know. We don't yet know what it is that we're actually going to get and how it can be used. Also, it's the unfortunate part is at this point, we're asking for your cooperation and expecting folks to participate in our surveillance testing program. We can't mandate it, and just being honest. It's unfortunate because we wish we could, because we do think it's that important, and that's why we're asking for everyone's cooperation. Um, so that's part of the challenge. And I think, again, we go back to capacity, and we definitely would need a third party partner in order to administer the PCR test with any kind of regularity. So we've got cost, human resources, availability that are our main issues. But once we get more information about the relief bill, we certainly will have a better picture of what we can use those funds for. Is lunch all together in the cafeteria for multiple groups, or students continue in the classrooms? They will be continuing in the classrooms. And as we said, spacing out as much as they can, certainly making use of outdoors as they are able to do that as well. It's known the rapid tests are not accurate. That's true. Again, we're using those because of the availability from the state. And I do think in most cases, we advise families to get verification of PCR. Julia, would you want to speak momentarily to that? Did I miss anything, or anything wrong about the testing?
No, I think the issue with PCR tests is, I mean, you already spoke to it that, we're being provided with the Binax now rapid test. But the nice part about that is it is a rapid test and we can get the results right away that afternoon. And we've been sending out the result in the afternoon to the people that have volunteered. PCR test is going to actually take, a much longer period of time. I think it depending on, it could be anywhere from 24 to maybe even 5-6 days, 24 hours to like 5-6 days. So, there is that component where we do then have to send it out to a laboratory and then get the result back. So it is a much more complicated process for a PCR test than for us to just do a rapid test, which is a 15-minute turnaround.
Thanks, Julia. So another question about fully virtual instruction. Will it just be students sitting in the class, sitting in on a class of in person? This is really not adequate. So again, it's going to be a challenge. We recognize that our teachers have gotten so good at managing the different dynamics of the hybrid model. So it is going to be a different version of that. But this is why we have a task force subgroup looking at how can we best support them, how can we best support the students. And this is again why we have the virtual office hours and the academy period as ways to specifically support our full virtual students. We are going to be monitoring it and looking to see if there's any additional supports that we can provide. But as I said earlier on the presentation, at this point, we're not anticipating shifting to fully virtual teachers. If the numbers look different, and again, we will look, especially at the elementary level, we'll look from a district-wide perspective and see if the numbers of students who choose to stay fully virtual give us a different solution. If there's enough students, particular grade bands, that would warrant a full class, we're not opposed to looking at going in that direction. We just didn't have that happen back in November when we last asked. We're expecting that we're going to see a similar result this time. But again, if the numbers show it, we'll consider supplementing that potentially with additional teacher. So Rose, I see your note. We did see Paula's letter earlier today, so definitely have that on the radar. Amanda, child has a sore throat, can't pass the COVID questionnaire. So yeah, a child who's just home because of the runny nose or the can't pass the screener, they will be able to log in virtually. We're viewing that basically as a school imposed quarantine, for lack of a better comparison, because we recognize we're telling you they can't come to school until you get a negative test. So we will let them access. It's when children are really sick. If they've got a fever, they can't keep their head up, they're throwing up, they're whatever, they're really not well enough to engage. They need to take a sick day. It'll be an excused sick day. We'll help them to catch up. But if it's something like the sore throat that goes away 3 hours later and you still have to go get a COVID test, we've heard all the stories and we appreciate the patience around that. We will let them log in if it's something where they just can't pass the screener for the day. Okay, yep. Thank you for that, Rose. Okay. Okay, and I see Dorea's comment supporting that. Okay. So if your student with intellectual or developmental disabilities.
Dr. Comment on that particular
Yes, please.
part of the comment, because the students who are in our self-contained classes at Colonial and Siwanoy and in the middle and high school, we've actually offered daily instruction from September, and majority of the parents actually have taken part in that. So they're either actually fully virtual or in person, and majority are in person already. So I am not aware of any hybrid families that fall into that particular category. I know that other special class students, we have offered for them to come back full time, and some of them have stayed in hybrid model. But the students with the greatest disabilities, they actually have chosen one or the other, actually.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the clarification. The question, will siblings in a family be expected to go back to school in person if full-time isn't selected, or will the decision be made on a student-by-student basis? We can definitely honor student-by-student basis. You may have one child who wants to be fully in person, the other who's better suited to full virtual. We can definitely work on a student-by-student basis. If many opt for full-time in person, will that potentially prohibit a return? We're pretty confident, we are confident at the elementary level that we can accommodate all students who want to come back to full-time instruction. The secondary level is really where we run into the space issues. So as I said, if we can't accommodate everyone who wants to return, then we'll look at a modified version of the hybrid, but one that returns to gets all students more in-person time. Okay, the next comment is echoing the comment that was put in above in the chat. Okay. Okay, the next comment just recognizing the mental health toll that this closure really has taken on a lot of students, and just expressing the appreciation, the opportunity to come back in. So you're welcome. As high school elects to go full virtual, if a high school student elects to go full virtual, will they be permitted to attend in person for their AP exams, or will they be forced to take the online version?
Can I speak to that, Dr.
Berkowitz, I
Yes.
would love for you to speak.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that question. For families who have students that are taking AP exams, as announced by the counseling department, for logistical reasons, indeed, we only have 2 exams that will be offered. So that is the AP Statistics exam and the AP Spanish exam. All other exams will be taken electronically and virtually from the home. The testing will not be on site, though it will align with College Board guidelines. It's actually an offer that comes from the College Board that we determined made logistic sense given the pandemic.
Thank you. And I would say if parents have particular questions about that, they should reach out to their guidance counselor, would be the best source of information on that. Great, very good. So a question, if with the space issues or the transmission of older students, why not keep the middle school, high school in hybrid? That is an option. And that's where having metrics, having the data about how many students want to come back really are going to be key in making that determination. And the other piece I would say, if for some reason the metrics do take a bad turn, not that we want to, and it'd be incredibly complex, but the same way we've been able to pivot between hybrid and fully remote, theoretically, one could pivot between full-time, in-person, and hybrid as a system if need be. So I think right now our goal is to try to do this in a way that is successful, to have surveillance testing so that we can have a metric to determine if our continued plan is safe and is progressing successfully or not. So this is right now, this is our plan, and we'll see if we're able to execute as the rest of the spring goes by. For high school, the administration actually asked students if they wanted full-time in person or to keep hybrid. Was hybrid explored while giving accommodations who are struggling with learning and or mental health to come in every day? So this is another one I think I'm going to, I don't know if Mark or Julia would like
Sure.
to speak to,
Yeah.
or Lynn, to some of the priority that we put on students who maybe needed more time.
Thank you for that, Dr. Champ. It is similar to some of the response that Julia had provided. Students in the Foundations program have been offered in most of the on-site, right? Our Foundation students and certain other students have been on site really for quite some time now. There is a cohort of students that have also been given a deliberate kind of invitation due to their academic needs to be attending classes still virtually, but inside the building so that they can get some additional supports. Right now, it's really a matter of space. We are trying to bring in as many students as we can, following the survey data that we receive, precisely so we can address the struggling and the mental health needs of students. In direct response to the question, the district survey is the survey that is going on behalf of the high school and all other schools. We have not sent a standalone survey with that question.
That's similar to the middle school as well. Excuse me. We brought in as many students as we could, and then we're looking at the social and emotional. We've had parents and some psychologists and psychiatrists reach out to us. And so, you know, we look at each one on an individual basis. Students that are failing multiple classes after we've gotten some of our ENL students and some students that have some special needs. So we're working on that to bring in as many as we can as well. And since school started, we've had most of our students that need the most support have been in every day.
Thank you. And I will just echo the survey that was mentioned. You may recall we did a survey a few weeks ago asking folks what their preference would be between hybrid and full-time in person, and if they had to choose, forget exactly how we framed it, but it was looking for preferences. It was asking adults, it wasn't asking the students, but it was asking the parents. And in that survey, we had some of the best response rate of any survey that we've given out since I've been in the district. We had over 2,000 responses. And there was a clear majority at all levels from elementary up, predominantly at elementary, but still a majority as you move through the grades for parents requesting full-time in person, even with it being at 3 feet. So that really is what showed us that this was a direction that it was certainly never going to meet what everybody wanted, everyone's wishes, but it was a clear majority of families asking for this same move. So with the last survey, could we have created different scenarios from middle school or high school? There's really only a few scenarios to choose from. The one thing we did say to ourselves and, say to you, if the survey had shown a different preference at elementary versus middle school versus high school, we would have definitely looked at different solutions. And that's, to be honest, why partially you're looking at a different solution for elementary versus secondary now. When we started this whole model back in September, we made a K-12 decision because we'd heard from parents that they wanted their children on a similar rotation as a family. But when it came to this decision, we cleared a clear message that we needed to treat the elementaries differently potentially than the middle school and the high school. But what we did hear from everyone is they wanted children back in school, not from the majority. I should say not everyone, but the majority. How can parents and kids make a commitment if it's not really clear? We're trying to lay this out as clearly as possible. Certainly, I would say if you have questions lingering after tonight, again, speak to your building administrators. They've been part of the planning teams for these. They can really take the time and go through and be very specific with you about anything you're not clear about. So why do I keep saying take a seat from someone else? What does that mean? So again, speaking specifically of the secondary buildings, if we collect the surveys and we have so many students planning to return full time and we can't accommodate them within a 3-foot distance in our classrooms, we're then going to have to go to a modified hybrid model. More students in school more often than what we have now, but it may not mean all students can get back in who want to be in. So if 10 of us say, yes, we're coming back into school, we set up a classroom that accommodates those 10 students, and then 2 of those students choose not to come on a regular basis, there's probably 2 more students sitting at home that couldn't be in that cohort day who would be there faithfully in that classroom. So it's just kind of a reminder that all of our decisions impact one another, especially when we've got such limited space resources. Scenarios of the modified hybrid as, again, an example, and it will depend on the number. So once we have the number, we'll fully flesh out what those percentages are and what a rotation looks like. But it could, right now, our cohort model has been A days on basically Mondays and Tuesdays, B days on Wednesdays and Thursdays, rotating that middle day. So that's basically a 2-day or 2.5-day rotation. We could come up with something that looks more like a 4-day in-person, 2-day out model. 3 days in, 3 days out, 6 days in, 3 days out, something like that. But when you do that, you basically, instead of splitting students into 2 cohorts, you split them into 3, and then you have 2 out of 3 cohorts in at any given point in time. And that's what gives you your 66% model. So that's just an example. It's much easier to look at on paper. And again, if we get to that point, we certainly will put that out in paper in black and white in a visual way to try to help folks make sense of that, because it is more complicated, but it is a way of getting more students into school. Can you elaborate on satellite classrooms? Well, we probably won't have those, but I will elaborate that when I say satellite classrooms, that means if we can't fit all the students in the room, the overflow students would go to a satellite or a different classroom, and then they would Google Meet into the teacher's class. So again, if we had a classroom that could fit 22 at 3-foot distancing, but there were 25 in the class, theoretically, they could go somewhere else, log in on the computer and join the class. But as we said earlier, we really don't have extra space. So we will not likely be using satellite classrooms too much. Someone on another call thought when we said satellite, that maybe that meant bringing in portable classrooms. That could potentially be a long-term solution. That's not something that can help us this spring. But if we wanted to go that direction, we certainly could explore something like that. Okay, again, we've talking about space at the secondary, so we've covered that quite a lot. Will all standardized test state exams need to be in person? At this point, our understanding of Regents and 3 through 8 testing is it is still paper pencil testing. It is still the same tests that they would have given had we had a normal year in school, which is problematic in a lot of ways. But from everything we know, those are still standardized paper pencil. Middle school, high school, if the number of those who wish to return exceeds the available seats, how will students be selected to return? Again, we're going to try to cohort all of those who would. We certainly want to make a way for all students who want to be in school to be in school. It's just a matter of how we would cohort and rotate the cohorts if we were not able to get all students in at the same time. They can indicate whether they'll be. We didn't put a question like that on the survey. I'll be honest, let me think about that one. Part of me would rather handle the question was if a student selects full-time but then could they indicate if they're willing to give up their spot for someone else if there's need for an overflow. I think I'd rather handle that on a case-by-case basis. I don't want to confuse folks in the survey. We really want to keep it as simple as possible, but that could be considered on a one-off conversation. If we commit to return despite a detailed plan at this stage, can we rescind our commitment to return to high school if that plan isn't safe? So if I'm understanding correctly, I believe you're saying commit to starting full in person, but then if you get to a point where you're not feeling like it's safe, can you shift to full virtual? Ideally, we want folks to commit. That is certainly an easier shift to make. What we really can't have is people moving in and out, which is why we're trying to be so transparent about what to expect on the front end. And again, some certain things I would say speak to your building principal. If you have concerns, questions before you make your commitment and even during the process. But we really have to get some stability as we get going with this plan. For students with IEPs and 504s, will hybrid schedules be an option open if appropriate? I guess the real problem here, this question came up this morning too, is again, as I said earlier, when we say hybrid, that's cohorted 6-foot distancing. As soon as you start bringing more students into the building, you are no longer at 6-foot distancing. So hybrid as we know it really disappears. The teachers will still have the camera in the classroom, so the instructional process will still be there, but it's no longer going, at the elementary level in particular, it will be all in, there will no longer be cohorts. At the secondary level, Again, if we don't have capacity for 100%, we will have cohorts, but they'll look a little bit different. So I guess it really depends on the level, but the hybrid, as we know it, will change as we move forward, and that would be for all students. 15-minute turnaround time that can be inaccurate. Oh, that was about the testing. Approximately 15 minutes. Okay, governor announced yes. So yeah, we're following the state's new guidance issued about mandatory quarantines. So again, if someone's fully vaccinated and is exposed, they will no longer have to quarantine, which will help us with stability of staffing in the buildings, and also with travel quarantine, same thing. If they meet the requirements, they will not have to quarantine. So we're definitely adopting the state's guidelines, the new guidelines on those, which will give us incredible flexibility that we've been looking for. Okay. So Rose just had a clarifying question. Julie, I didn't know if you wanted to chime in on that. I didn't miss.
Actually, I wanted to comment on the previous one. I just want to make sure everyone understands that the district doesn't make any of our own guidelines. Everything we do, we're following the Department of Health guidelines. So when the governor says something, or the state of New York Department of Ed or Health says anything and gives us a guidance, that's what we follow. We don't make our own guidance.
And did you want to just touch a little bit more on the 504 IEP questions?
Sure. I know that I guess, well, I know that the accommodations are being met. It's a little different if the student is not in person. I'm not exactly sure what the question is asking. I know that, like Mr. Berkowitz said, we have been bringing a lot of kids back that want to be in on daily basis, and they're really struggling. So we have made that commitment to bring more kids back, but we also are at a point where we cannot bring more kids back with the 6-foot distancing in the classroom. And I think that's where the issue is, which is why if we are going to the shorter distance between students, then we would be able to bring more kids back and therefore provide services in person rather than virtually.
Thank you. Another question, how accurate do you think the survey results were, given that people had the option to respond multiple times? You know, that's always an open question. We did have a ton of results. You know, in some cases, they did seem questionably high, being honest. But we were able to drill down a little bit deeper to see when those results came in, see how they meshed with other data that we had as far as number of students who were already fully virtual. We aggregated some of the numbers to see, okay, if we aggregate, maybe we can eliminate some of the potential, you know, higher numbers. You know, it could have been both parents maybe had gone in and answered the questions for their children, not realizing. There's a lot of different reasons that could have been. But the long and short is, once we made all the adjustments as based on things that we saw that needed adjustment, we really still saw a strong majority across all grade levels for the full-time in person. It was as high as 70, 80, towards 90% at the elementary level. It was, I don't want to misremember, but it was definitely, I'm going to say 60 to 70% middle school, and high school was upwards of 60%. So it was a majority in all cases. So were they 100% accurate? No, but we felt there was a strong enough indication of the broader community's perspective that it pointed us in the direction. Okay, similar question here. Okay, you know, and I would say certainly to the point, to the point of, you know, the survey's accuracy. That's why we're doing another survey, and we're getting emails, and we're requesting names, and we're really asking for commitments here. This will be the telltale of the true desire of the community. So we will certainly be analyzing that as they come in. So I live down the street from the high school and estimate that a quarter of the kids are not wearing masks. How is mask wearing enforced on campus? Mr. Berkowitz, I put you on the spot again there.
No, I appreciate it. I think that that's such an essential question. I mean, first off, students come into the building, they're greeted by adults to collect their either physical COVID-free attestation or show the easy screen. So you cannot get past go without a warm welcome, but also attesting to your readiness to abide by the school district expectations, masks on, and then in the classrooms with the desk guards. Truth, at the high school level, with an open campus, even at lunch, there are going to be students that you see, as you describe, off campus with masks down. And there will even be students on campus during their lunch with masks off. We as adults walk the building either in our own classrooms to manage the space or in the common space of halls and remind students of our expectations. It's a highly supervised building. So we're going to continue to adhere to those guidelines, recognizing that there are times when students need a warm, caretaking reminder.
Another question, will there be state tests this year? As of right now, again, our information is Regents, a limited number of Regents exams, and the 3 through 8 state testing is still scheduled. We will know more specifics from the Board of Regents next week, but that requirement is still in place because of the U.S. Department of Education still requiring states to administer their accountability assessments. So more to come on that. Okay, and I think that about rounds things out. A couple of statements in the chat, but not questions to be answered. So maybe I'll give just another last call for questions. Okay, so it's a question. So I'm confused as a high school, middle school parent, how to make a decision when we don't know how many children are committing to full-time in person, especially when you're admitting that the high school is riskier. I do not want my children to be outliers, but I also do not want to create an unwarranted risk. You know, I know it's a tough question. It's a very difficult decision. I am always of the plan for the worst, hope for the best approach, which is why, you know, we want to be clear that the desks are going to be 3 feet apart. And I would say whether it's 100% of students are able to return and we're able to accommodate them, or it's less than that and we're maybe at a 67% or 75% cohort, 3 feet is the lowest that we're holding. That is the floor of what we're holding to for distancing. Certainly, if we can get more than that, we will. In the cafeteria spaces, we're looking to maintain 6 feet at the middle school and high school campus. Music programs are seated at 12 feet. Physical education is outside when it can be, 12 feet when they're doing aerobic activities. So we are being attentive to that. But those spacing distances are probably accurate no matter which model we wind up with at the middle school and high school. So I say that because I'm hoping maybe that can help you to make your decision. Students will be closer than 3 feet when they're walking in the hallways. You know, those are just the really honest answers to those questions. Certainly we can, you know, keep folks apprised of the results, but we also can't have a situation where, you know, we say, okay, 75% of students have said they're coming back. Then all of a sudden, you know, a student has that fear of missing out moment, and all of a sudden now they want to join back in. You know, there's got to be a point at which we have some clarity and some certainty so that we can complete the planning and put the plan in place. So as you're making your decisions, just think about those distancings. That's the lowest we're going is 3 feet. Our hope is it will be better than that in some cases, but that's what we're all having to make our own decisions based on as well. When we're doing the survey this time, folks will have to answer their name, email, etc. So we will know if there are duplicates. The survey is not anonymous because we need firm commitments. In non-pandemic, I'm going to ask Ms. Sabia on this one. In non-pandemic times, approximately how far apart are the desks at the middle school, high school?
So it depends on the room. So the middle school has not been traditionally set up for rows, which is what we would need to do now. We're trying to get creative to get as many seats in the class as we could. Sometimes it would be 3 feet. Sometimes it would be less than 3 feet. It depends on the groups. It depends on how many students are in a group. But traditionally, when you're talking 3 feet, the measurement is different. It could be 3 feet between desks as opposed to 3 feet between the center of a person's head to the other center of the other person's head. So that would vary. So it would be approximately 3 feet or greater, depending on the setup of the classroom.
Thank you. So question, now that we have more information, can hybrid be a selection on the survey? The problem is we can't have full-time in person and have hybrid at the same time. And if we allow all 3 choices on the survey, we're not going to get the accurate information we need for planning purposes. It really has to be the choice of 2. If we get the surveys back at the middle school and high school and we see the majority are now choosing full virtual, that's probably be a good sign to for us to like take a pause and say, okay, maybe there's something more here than what we thought. But to that point, if half the students stay on full virtual, the other half come in, we're likely to have closer to 6-foot distancing because we're only going to be at 50% capacity. So it's somewhat of a moving target, and I wish it wasn't, but there's no way we could get accurate information by having all 3 options on the survey, unfortunately. Did we get a question as to whether high school students themselves will be surveyed? To be honest, you are the decision makers in your household. And as much as we do try to incorporate student voice whenever we can, this one is in your realm. And so that's why we have to survey you and for you to be the decision makers on this. I know you know that, you're the parents, but yeah, we try to incorporate student voice when we can, but this is one that we really can't leave in their hands. Can you offer a ranked choice? Again, we can consider, but the problem is if we don't get an accurate count of who's planning to come in full time, then we can't plan appropriately. That's our struggle. So if there's a plan B, what if this fails miserably and leads to an outbreak? Do we go back to hybrid? I would say, I think I said it earlier in the presentation, theoretically, yes, hybrid is an option. All virtual is an option. I'm sorry, can you hear me? I lost my earbuds. Okay, thanks, Lynn. Yeah, so hopefully would not have to go back to full virtual, but if we get into this and see that we're seeing an increased prevalence or spread, we're going to have to take a step back and likely increase the distancing. So that would likely put us back to hybrid. So just to get more thoughts about the survey. So we can continue to think about that and explore that. At this point, not sure that we can put hybrid on there as an option. Again, right now we don't have hybrid on the survey, so it's hard to answer the question of if the survey showed 80% of families preferring to stay hybrid, would we stay for the middle school and high school? The survey that we took originally did really, it indicated a very strong preference for full-time. And for the student by student basis, we are asking parents to fill it out separately for each student anyways. So if you do want one child to be fully virtual and one child to be in person, you are able to do that already with the way it's set up. Okay. All right. So we got, thanks for the clarification on those questions. So I'll just leave it open again for another minute on any of those. We'll certainly take some of these unanswered questions and we can debate those internally tomorrow. But I thank you all for taking the time to be with us. I thank you for the thoughtful questions and your patience and concern. We want to get this right for sure. And we appreciate everything that you all have done throughout this year because this really has been an effort on everybody's part. And thank you for all your support. With that, we wish everyone a good night and be well. And we look forward to seeing everyone again soon.